Hey everybody, Pastor Aaron here, walking into chapter 2 of our Growing Up series, getting you guys launched out of this book into your own Bible study reading plan. And it really, as we go through this training course in our iGroups series, we're in chapter 2 and we're still kind of on this, why is it a part of our Christian walk to not just be a disciple, but to go and make disciples? And so we've seen this common theme through the last few weeks, trying to get everybody into this mentality like, yes, this is important. This is a foundational part of my faith in Jesus Christ, is not just holding this cure for death as a result of sin to ourselves. In the book, in chapter 2, Robbie Gallaty cites, kind of gives a familiar story about someone knowing, say, the cure for cancer. And he starts out the story and just says, what if someone came to you, a very respected professor or a scientist, and said, I've got a secret I need to share with you. Meet me for lunch next Tuesday. And I really want to tell you about this. You go to lunch that Tuesday, you sit down with the scientist, and the scientist says, I've got something that is going to change the world, and I want to tell you about it, but get you to get the news out about it. And so this scientist, this doctor, professor, whatever, goes forward and tells you the cure for cancer. And it's delightfully simple, and it's something that makes total sense when you hear it. And you're like, wow, how was I entrusted with this information? So the question is, what do you do with that information? What would you do if someone sat you down in a cafe or sat you down at lunch and said, hey, listen, I've got this simple cure for one of the world's most virulent, widespread diseases, and I've got a cure for it. Here it is. Delightfully simple. Just something you can begin to spread the news about. And what would you do with that news? In the book, it talks a little bit about the fact that you would leak it to the media, you would do everything you could to establish your credibility, but you still, even if people didn't really believe you, you'd tell them, you would be out there, you would be renowned, all of a sudden you would have this access, and people would want to know, but you wouldn't keep it to yourself so you could be, famous or anything. But some of you were already thinking that. But you would definitely get it out to other people so that they then could get that news out to others, and it could spread across the globe. You see where I'm going with this. You guys are super smart. The gospel is like that. God had a plan to remedy sin and to reconnect us with Him. Even before we get to eternity and we're perfected and sinless, like He had a remedy that to save us from spiritual death, and that was Jesus dying on the cross. That was Jesus rising again. That's good news about all we have to do is have faith in Jesus Christ. So in essence, there's a cure for the spiritual death that comes from sin. Is it going to eradicate and abolish sin? Not this side of eternity. But if we have that, why do we keep that to ourselves? If you're a believer and you know Jesus Christ is the only way to reconnect with a holy, righteous God, why would you keep that to yourself? You've heard me say it before. Penn and Teller, those guys, they said, what kind of awful family member or friend do you have to be to have this really good news if it's true? And they don't even believe, but he made this point. And not share it with people, and to keep it to yourself. And that, in essence, is why we keep harping on Matthew 28:19-20, which you're very familiar with for now, but chapter 2 really talks through this. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. That's what we're going to try and do even in these iGroups is really not just become disciples, deeper disciples, but be disciples who can create and make disciples. So how do you do that? Well, that's why we've started out in the Growing Up book. That's why students and adult leaders and other leaders, that's why we need you to pass along this, so that it's more than information. It's more than just biblical training. It is, hey, we want to all of a sudden realize, like, this is really good news. This is life-changing, life-saving happening, not even information. Sometimes we get caught up in the fact that we think, well, if we could just, and it's our modern world, if we could just get education to the corners of the earth, if we could just get the information out there, then people's lives would be changed, right? This isn't just in church or with the good news of the Bible. This is like, we think that information just in general, that's why people suffer around the globe and around the world. We think it's because, oh, well, they just don't have data and information. If they did, that would be life-changing. Well, I'm here to tell you that information is not life-changing. In fact, the dissemination of information can be used for good or evil. You see that with the internet. People have access to Google, how not to wreck your life. And people have that information. Does that mean they're not going to still do it? I mean, no. Think about substances, alcohol. You can look up all the things about tobacco, and still people do it because the information itself is not life-changing. What is life-changing is the experience of, particularly the experience of someone who's gone before and their life has been changed. And so we see that viscerally in the good news of the gospel, because you really can see life change. And so we're called in Matthew 28:19 through 20, we are truly called to go and make disciples. Don't just keep this to ourselves, this good news about the gospel, but go and spread the word and help people realize what God did for them, and the Holy Spirit will begin to transform them, not just through information, but through transformation, because they can't help but be transformed once you know about this. So that if you break down that passage, Matthew 28:19 through 20, you see three things, and this is listed in your chapter in the book: go, baptize, and teach. And let me explain these. Go is the missional or the missionary aspect. It's like actually pounding the pavement, like actually going out there. What does that look like for each individual? It may look international for you. It may look local for you. It may look digital. It may be, I've got some influence online. Like, I can spread the word. You've got to go. It's the movement. It's the initial step. It's taking that step. And then baptize. Baptize is this kind of relational, like, bring into the family aspect. And so this baptize, yes, the dipping under that we do, part of that is that you guys realize there's nothing magical about the water when Baptists baptize or when Presbyterians sprinkle. There's nothing wrong. What the impact is, you're making public a profession of faith that you've already made in private, personally. And so it's a symbol of coming into the fold, being a part of the family of God. It is a symbol. So that baptize is announcing your relationship. And the book, that chapter 1 goes into that a little bit further. And then last but not least, teach. And so this is that component that is the hard one for us. Because, yeah, we can go and pound the pavement and tell other people. We can evangelize for anything, not just the gospel. A lot of times we like a product so much. We'll go and tell somebody, oh, you really got to get these shoes. They're amazing. Like, this phone has changed my life. And though that sounds silly, we do that easily, right? But when it comes to spiritual stuff and when it comes to Jesus, we're a little embarrassed to say, well, Jesus has changed my life. And it's hard. You're probably sitting there thinking, Aaron, you get paid to do that. You get paid to share the gospel with people. Well, yeah, but I'm an evangelist anyway. I always joke around with people, I'm not a salesman, I'm an evangelist. I have to be buying what I'm selling. The difference to me in a salesman and an evangelist is that, a salesman, they'll sell it to you whether if they're buying it or not. I always think it's funny. You go to the car dealership and you get your car work done, and the mechanic works at Nissan, yet he drives a Toyota, and he's like, oh yeah, I love it. The salesman, a car salesman, you ask him, you say, well, what car do you have? And they'll tell you, well, I don't have a Nissan. And you're like, well, why are you selling? But an evangelist uses that product or that whatever it is integral in their life, and they want to share it with others. And everything else pales in comparison to the evangelism that is telling, man, Jesus changed my life. You gotta have him. That kind of thing. And so teach is this rational learner aspect. This believer is to teach others about Jesus and how to follow him. So the disciple making isn't just passing on information, and that's been kind of my main point. But the disciple making part of it is what a lot of times is missing, because we think, oh, well, we'll just pass on the information and that will be good enough. Well, the information's great and biblical knowledge is awesome, but apart from the Spirit and apart from being connected and tied in to a family of believers that, like we talked about previously, Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Without that, you're not really discipling, and you're not really both growing in that discipline, both growing in that and what it is to become more like Christ. And so that's kind of the component that's missing. That's why we have small groups at church, but also we go even deeper into these iGroups and more even like living life together accountability groups. And so that is what I wanted you to consider. And as you guys discuss and talk through it, come up with ways where you can, how could I be less of a salesman when it comes to the gospel and more of an evangelist? How could I be, maybe you don't have that problem. Maybe it's just, how do I get over my fear of telling people that I follow Christ? How do I, what steps do I take to even broach the subject that I am a Christian with some of my friends or some of my family? And so those are some of the questions that I want you guys to answer and ask each other. Be real in your iGroups as you discuss and just say, like, I don't feel like I can do that. And then state why and come up with some ways that you can do it that fits you and fits your personality and how you were created. This is hugely important in your faith journey, because it's not just accepting Christ. That takes care of everything for you, but part of the command is not just accepting Christ so you'll go to heaven one day. It's spreading the good news, just like that cancer cure. If you had it, you would not keep it to yourself. Partly because it would be like ethically wrong to keep it to yourself, but partly just because you'd be so excited about people being healed. You'd probably be excited about a little bit of the spotlight too, but as you pass that information on, as it became commonplace, you would be excited to see cancer one day be obliterated, And so that's huge. That's in essence what being a disciple who makes disciples is pass it on. Pass the good news of the gospel on, not just information, but transformation. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to what comes out of your discussions.